All good things must come to an end, and nothingness is indeed a turtle, but how can we make this nothingness or this end be faster? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Darkness Mist, and I'm going to walk you through a basic overview of final fights in KH2 Rando. Let's start off with a basic understanding of what this video does and does not cover. First, this video is not comprehensive. This is just a basic overview of different strategies to get through the fights, but it is not by any means the only way to do it or the best ways to get through it based on your specific toolkit. You may end up in a situation with a weird amalgamation of tools that don't exactly fit the criteria we're talking about, and you'll have to kind of figure it out as you go until I make a video covering those kind of niche cases that can occur. Second, I'm not going to be talking about Reflectless here. Reflectless deserves its own video, and it's a very difficult way to get through final fights. That can occur. It's unlikely to occur, but it can happen, and it deserves its own space in its own video. Third, when it comes specifically to Dome Skip, I'm going to refer to basic ways to get through Dome Skip. We're not going to be looking at any sort of fancy Combo Master strats or Limit Form strats to accomplish this. All of this is really just to provide a groundwork for people to work off of and build their skills. Future videos will cover more difficult or niche or interesting strategies relating to the final fights themselves. For now, we're going to get started with final fights. Starting final fights may seem trivial, but there are a few time saves you can do. For instance, when you first come into final fights, there's an alcove off to the right that if you have aerial dodge to and glide to, you can easily reach. There's also an alcove to the left that if you have aerial dodge 4 and glide 4, you can reach, although it's a lot tighter. Going into either of these alcoves will save you having to do the RC, letting the buildings fall, and saving you a couple of seconds. Once you transition into the second room, you're going to be greeted with buildings getting thrown at you. Your instinct might say take the first RC and then slam through the buildings, but if you actually fly further down, you can get a later RC and save yourself that animation time from doing earlier RCs. This again is dependent on your movement. If you have low levels of movement, going for the second building is ideal. If you have high levels of movement, going for the fourth building is ideal. One quick note on this, the RC shows up before the shadow on the ground. This means if you fly to the edge of the shadow or under the building, you won't be able to trigger the RC. So you want to be a slightly further back than you think in order to start the transition. Once you go through the RCs, you'll be put at the engine core. If you have Magnega, this really doesn't apply, but going to the back railing will cause the enemies to spawn slightly closer. If you don't have Magnega or Magnera, going to a corner will cause the enemies to spawn in a much more precise and locked-in location, allowing you to hit them easier, or for Chicken to whistle to get them to transition easier. You do have to be on the ground for the enemies to spawn, however, so if you don't have Chicken or a Magnet or anything like that, you will have to jump up in the air, hit them, then fall back on the ground before more enemies are going to spawn it. Now we're going to move into the engine core fight. Now the engine core room spawns you in a little bit of a tightly confined space, however, using this space to your advantage will be the key to victory. The best route to navigate through this is often the use of Final Form and Jump Magnets. There are two waves of enemies that each spawn depending on the health of the engine core or the amount of hits it's taken. After clearing the waves of enemies, the engine core will be destroyable once again. Since the waves consist primarily of creepers and assassins, jump magnets will allow you to catch them pretty much immediately as they spawn in, and it will prevent especially the assassins from going underground. You do have to be careful at the start of the second wave. There is a claymore enemy that will spawn in, and its claymore will be put at the base of the engine core. So either hit reflect or do a jump magnet to make sure that this enemy does not deal damage to you and prevent you from easily finishing off the second wave. But what happens if you run out of your final form? Or maybe you entered without a final form or a magnet. How do you get through this? If you have access to Chicken Little, this fight will become a little more trivial and a little easier to navigate. It won't be as fast as using final form, but it will net you a pretty safe route through the fight. The general idea here is to let Chicken summon the enemies to you, and then use a Blizzard, Thunder, or Ground combo to finish them off. Chicken will summon/whistle them all in when they are a certain distance away from him. Your best bet is to get a little distance from the enemies, then allow Chicken to summon them in for you to finish them off. Chicken's range does not fully fill the room, so sometimes enemies will still go underground and you may have to parry them or reflect them to get them out. If you don't have Chicken or Magnet, your best bet is to use some range magics to help clear them out, and some reflects to get some extra damage and finish off a couple of enemies when they try to attack you. Even Final Form Fire can be a really good strategy here if you don't have a magnet, just allowing enemies to get knocked up into the air by the finisher. Moving on, we have AX1. AX1 will always start with the same opening attack, but depending on where his health is at, that will change what attack he chooses to use. His opening attack consists of Zoldan's spears, but he can also use Xigbar's lasers and Demic's water clones as well. When you enter the fight, your best strategy is to go straight forward and do a full ground combo on him. Once you hit whatever finisher you have, immediately mash out a reflect so you can get the damage off of the first slam of the spears. Because of all the damage he has taken, AX1 will retaliate with a slash, so immediately hit 2 reflects again to make sure you don't get hit by the slash or the jumping spears. From here you can do another ground combo and then wait for his next attack to reflect, and then he should be dead. However, AX1 and AX2 have kind of a weird hitbox, and sometimes you can clank against the chair in the background. If you clank twice in a row, your best bet is to step slightly back and wait for AX1 and AX2 to do an attack against you, then simply reflect that, and then go in for another combo. While on beginner you might be able to take a hit, on crit you will most definitely die from any of these attacks, so it's better to just play it a little safe and a little slower if you get unlucky with the RNG and clank against the chair. The fight with AX1 will end when his health bar reaches 0, and it will immediately transition you into the AX2 fight after a cutscene. If you find yourself in Dragon Xemnas and Rando, you need to check your settings just to make sure that everything's installed properly, because even in base Rando, with no settings, you should never encounter Dragon Xemnas. Once we enter the AX2 fight, there are a few things we need to be aware of, as well as some removed mechanics and some added mechanics. Unlike AX1, AX2 will not use his allies' weapons as attacks against you. However, this has been replaced with a knockback mechanic and health gates. The first health gate occurs when he reaches 2 full bars of health, and the second one occurs when he has a bar and a half left. Once he reaches these health gates, he will perform a knockback attack that you must get hit by in order to continue the fight. But to start, we need to get him to those health gates. AX2 will always open with the same attack. He will try to slash at you. Your best bet is either to just reflect this or to walk a few steps forward, then reflect if you want to try and get the splash damage onto him. After the slash, you want to perform a full ground combo and then wait for him to either retaliate or knock you back. If you end up clanking against the throne, your best bet is to step slightly back like you did with AX1 and wait for him to either try to slash you or put up the barrier in front of him and reflect either of those attacks to get the damage out. Once those attacks have passed, then you can do a ground combo again and force him into the transition phase. The transition phase occurs with you needing to glide to a building, then perform an RC before heading back to AX2. With the first transition, your best bet is to let yourself fall down and then glide slightly forward and left, waiting for the RC to appear. You want to glide roughly towards this building, but one will appear a little closer to you that you can use to perform the RC and to finish the first phase. After the animations of the RC are finished, the most important thing is that you immediately perform an aerial dodge before you start gliding. If you do not perform an aerial dodge, Xemnas will start trying to fire lasers at you, preventing you from getting back close to him. For whatever reason, the aerial dodge allows you to skip past this set of attacks and get back to AX2 to damage him to the next transition. Once you get back close to AX2, your best bet is to land a little bit away from the throne, as you don't know what attack he is going to perform. If he performs a barrier, you can walk right up to him, do a reflect at the end of the barrier, then do a ground combo, and hopefully that should be enough to transition you. However, if he does a slash, you will want to reflect the slash just to make sure you don't take any damage, then do 2 full ground combos, and that should be enough to transition you. Once again, if you're clanking against the throne, your best bet is to back up very slightly and wait for him to do either of his attacks, then reflect once again. Once he reaches the second health gate, you'll be knocked back again, and now you actually have 2 choices. The safest and slower route is to let yourself just free fall until the lasers stop firing at you, then glide forward and to the left like you did with Transition 1. You will reach a building that you can perform the RC on, and then you will be able to transition immediately into the last phase of AX2. However, there is a faster building that you can go for if you're feeling risky. This fast building has about a 75% success rate overall. This is simply due to the RNG of where Xemnas chooses to spawn the buildings that he throws at you. If he spawns buildings too low, your best bet is to abandon the track and then try and avoid the lasers and get to the safe building on the bottom left. However, if he spawns the buildings high, you should generally be safe enough to get the RC before the buildings hit you and transition immediately into the last phase. In order to maximize your chances of getting the good RNG, And to avoid the lasers, as soon as you get knocked back, you're going to spam aerial dodge. By mashing fast enough, the lasers won't be able to catch up to you and you can avoid all of them. And once you avoid all of them, that's when you start gliding forward and to the right. If you do it successfully and get the good RNG, you should be able to have a building appear right underneath you that you can immediately RC on. If you have bad RNG, your best bet is to just let yourself drop all the way to the ground and then glide forward and to the left and try and get to the safe building. Once you perform the aerial dodge after the reaction commands and glide back to AX2, you have to be a little more careful as now there will be lasers trying to shoot at you when you land on the throne. By landing off to the right of AX2, you will avoid these lasers spawning in and you can walk up to the throne without getting hit and still be able to reflect whatever incoming attack he does. As always, play it safe instead of risky here. It's better to not get hit at all as it can lead you to getting comboed really easily and die. Once you have downed AX2, we move into Final Xemnas. The start of Final Xemnas is always the same. He is going to perform a grab, try to throw you up in the air, then do a little dance of attacks at you. When the fight starts, you immediately want to mash out a reflect. That reflect will immediately cause Xemnas to go into the dance without giving you any of that animation of getting thrown up in the air. From here, you can perform one of two options. You can either go for the reflect dance, or you can just press the RCs to avoid Xemnas' attacks if you're not feeling comfortable with it. For the sake of this video, I'll walk you through how to do the reflect dance, but the timing itself is a little precise and it will take some work to get used to. After the initial reflect, you want to perform 4 to 5 RCs, then reflect, then do 2 more reaction commands. After those 2 reaction commands, you want to perform a reflect again, then a reaction command, then another reflect. You'll want to hit another 4 reaction commands after this to avoid his next attack and get him to his last phase of the dance. After those 4 reaction commands, you'll want to do a single reflect, 1 reaction command, then reflect again to catch him as he comes up below you. If you've performed the dance precisely, sometimes you will damage him enough that he will go straight into his laser phase and his second upwards attack will not come out. If you have too low of damage, he will do a little animation RC that you could just press triangle through and then do a combo on him to transition him into laser phase. Assuming you're coming into laser phase from the transition of the dance, you're going to be surrounded by a wave of bullets. Simply fall straight down to avoid the first circle of bullets. From here, you want to try and position yourself a little towards the center of the room if possible. This is so as we set up for dome skip, we can still get the reflect damage from the lasers and Xemnas won't go out of bounds. After the circle lasers, Xemnas will perform a couple of sets of 3 lasers that you can reflect for some easy damage. The reflect timing can be a little wonky, but generally if you do a half step forward into a reflect, that will hit the timing to get at least some, if not all, of the reflect damage out. After a couple of sets of 3 lasers, Xemnas will do another circle set of lasers around you, which you can do some reflects on to get some damage out. You'll want to wait till about the end of the 2 sets of lasers, then perform 2 reflects in a row. This will ensure that you get all the damage from the reflect onto Xemnas himself. Now let's talk quickly about dome skip. The biggest time save here is avoiding the dome animation that occurs when Xemnas reaches just a little bit into his last health bar. As you get close to this point, Xemnas will stop doing any sort of attacks no matter what he's doing and will try to put you into the dome transition. While in vanilla KH2, this is a forced thing to end the fight, in KH2 Rando you can actually completely skip this. The quickest and simplest way is by using the limit session that is provided with Riku. Remember that second set of circular lasers I talked about doing 2 reflects for? Part of the reason we do those 2 reflects is to get ourselves over to the limit menu before Xemnas can cast his dome animation on us. The other thing is that the reflect damage will still go out even after the start of the session limit. So by reflecting in the session, you will almost all the time guarantee getting into the dome skip animation. One other benefit is that you can still cast items while in session, so if you do not hit the health gate with your first session, you can simply refill your MP and go for it again. After either manually stopping the session limit by menuing down to the stop and hitting X, or by letting the animation completely finish, you will want to then cast immediately a reflect to prevent the dome animation from starting, then go into a session. If you do not cast the reflect or stagger Final Xemnas in some way, right after you finish the session, you will be forced into the dome animation. This is because there's a brief cooldown time between using limits that you must account for before going into a second session. And generally speaking, that is Final Fights. A more in-depth video will definitely cover all the different strategies, we'll cover Reflectless, and cover what happens, especially on crit, when you don't have enough damage to get Final Zemnis immediately into laser phase. So keep an eye on future videos that will cover that specific set of content. For now, I hope you all have enjoyed this basic overview of Final Fights. If you liked it, make sure you leave a like and a comment, and subscribe as well for future videos like this, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!